Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Crypto Beach. Today, we've got Kristina. She's going to talk us through her experience getting in crypto. She's going to share a lot of awesome insights. So without further ado, Kristina, go ahead and take it away.
Sure, yeah. Do you want to start with a question or what do you want to do first?
Definitely. So what brought you into crypto?
So actually I have a random story of how I got into crypto. I'm an entrepreneur. COVID came. I had been doing my bootstrap startup for 3+ years, had to shut it down. But being an entrepreneur, I always follow Gary Vee. I think he's a polarizing character, but I love like the baseline message of what he's talking about in terms of soft skills, compassion, and empathy, and how we like as leaders become this sort of new generation of CEO that has and encompasses all of those things. And so I heard him talking about it one day, basically being an avid follower of his. I ended up kind of digging into it a little bit more. I have ADHD, which I think is kind of a superpower for this space, because when something hits and you get excited, we have a beautiful thing called hyperfocus, and you just go. You just go and you're excited, and quite frankly, you have blinders on. You can't see anything else. And so I listened to a specific podcast. I believe he was on Modern Finance with Kevin Rose. Kevin Rose, a big venture capitalist that I was familiar with. And they started talking about it. And all of a sudden, like it just made sense. Like it clicked in terms of the use cases, in terms of the potential, the technology, and then NFTs being that like digital representation of what the technology can do in some ways. So it made a lot of sense. And I was just like, I was listening to the podcast in my headphones, which I'm always doing. I took off my headphones, went to my wife, and I was like, yo, this is going to be fucking huge. And it was just like, it made sense. And so I got into it. I did a ton of research, a ton of research. His whole thing was like, you need to do 50 hours of research before you get started on anything, before you buy anything. And I was like, done. You tell me what to do, coach, I got you. And so I did that. I did just hours and hours and hours upon research, got really excited about it, and was like, okay, I'm going to make my first investment ever as a 38-year-old woman in an NFT and in VeeFriends. So I was trying to get all this stuff ready. They did a great job onboarding people with content, taking you step by step how to do it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to buy some crypto. And I'm saying I was so green that in Canada, you can't just go and buy crypto from a financial institution. And I didn't know that at the time. So I like straight up called my bank and was like, I'm looking to buy some crypto. I'm trying to do that online. I don't really know how to do that. And they were like, yeah, no, like that's not possible. You can't do that. And obviously they weren't willing to provide me with any information on how to do that. So start messaging all these people. But that was only in May of 2021. So not that long ago. And it feels like the journey's been like 6-7 months. Feels like the journey's been like 6-7 years. It's been crazy.
That is nuts. So the bank didn't even help you out. They just were like, well, we can't help you with this. Figure it out on your own.
Yeah, and I mean, every country is going through that in different ways. Of course, some make it much more difficult than others. Some it's illegal. You can't even try to do that. So Canada is one of those examples. It's not easily accessible. You can get it, and there's ways to do it and ways to do it safely, thankfully. But yeah, they're not about to try to make it easy for you.
Oh, wow. So what are some tips or tricks, recommendations that you have for someone who's getting into it for the first time?
Yeah, I mean, I think first is understand like crypto as a general umbrella term is really big, right? There's a lot of aspects of
Yeah.
crypto, whether that's NFTs and using crypto as the currency to purchase them, whether that's DeFi, decentralized finance, and what does that look like with trading and day trading of all these different coins. There's multiple components of crypto. So I think first and foremost is getting that like baseline information. And I tell people digest information the way that you best receive information. So for me, with the way that my brain works, I tried for years and years and years to read books. And it wasn't until like I found audio and audio really became a thing that I was finally able to digest information in a way that made sense for my brain. And so that's how I've done a lot of this. And I've just researched. Thankfully, we're now at a point where like the 101s of NFTs or DeFi or DAOs, whatever that may be, you can pretty easily access that information. So doing that in terms of like a simple Google search, it's just like a ton of research is what I always start with. Understand the key terminology of what's happening. And then from there, I think that the best way to approach it is once you have a clear idea of like, where do I want to live within that? At least where do I want to start my focus? Then delve deeper into the actual like experience. I think there's no better way to learn and to educate yourself than to be in it. And so for me with NFTs, that was very much so like, where does this community exist? It exists on Discord, it exists on Twitter, and it exists specifically within Twitter Spaces, right? And so it was process of osmosis, like following people that I respected and then following the people that they followed that were talking about things that were of interest to me, and then getting into spaces and doing a ton of listening, a ton of learning. The whole like watching videos online isn't my thing, but there's a lot of resources that allow you to do that. So again, I think it's taking it from the big overarching, sometimes overwhelming theme of crypto, breaking that down of like, what are these components? And then what are the ones that really interest me? And where do I want to dig in further, at least to start? That doesn't mean you don't further research DeFi and DAOs and whatever later on, but it's just to say, get a general overarching view and understanding of it, and then delve further deeper into it to get the actual experience. You're never going to get the experience you really need to like fully understand it until you're living it. Like this is about day-to-day experience. You got to get in it. You got to get grimy. You got to be participatory. You got to like really do the work.
I agree. Wow, that's well said. On that topic of these various pockets underneath the crypto umbrella, you know, as far as those trends, DeFi, DAO, NFTs, what's most exciting to you, and where do you see the biggest opportunities for others who are getting into the space? Maybe not financially, we don't necessarily have to focus on that side of it, but more so around just kind of enablement.
Yeah, I mean, the NFTs was first and foremost how I got my feet wet in this world. And to me, that's because it made a lot of sense. So I was like a creative kid, but growing up in the generation that I grew up, it's not dissimilar to many people. There wasn't an option to be a creative. We weren't encouraged. If you wanted to be an artist growing up, which I did at some points, we were not encouraged to be an artist because nobody that was in a position of power above us, whether that was teachers, whether that was parents, whether that was caregivers, they were not saying that like, this is an opportunity for financial freedom. This is an opportunity to get paid, which ultimately that's what we're all trying to do. And so for me, it was like, cool, that can be a hobby, but like, what are you going to do? And so when I found NFTs and I saw just like this digital representation of the art world with and backed up by this really powerful underlying technology that thankfully I was in a position to understand from my experience as an entrepreneur, it just excited me. Like I love art and I've always just had a big passion for it, but I never really had an outlet for it. It wasn't something that was going to make me money. And so I didn't invest the time in it. And now all of a sudden it was an opportunity to kind of re-engage. I think Jimmy Nichols, who is an influencer in the space at J1MMY, I think it is. I can tell you so you can put it in the show notes. But he talks about in his pinned tweet is like the fact that NFTs have reignited this like magic of childhood that so many of us as creatives felt. Like art was an outlet for many of us. Art was a place of like solace. Like I would spend hours doing art and drawing and like in it. Wasn't going anywhere, like creepy kid, you know, like weird kid, just drawing, painting, doing whatever. And it's like, that provided me with something, like it provided me with some sort of like fulfilling an emotional desire. And for years you just shut it down because it wasn't an option. You just couldn't do it. And it's kind of reignited like that magic that many of us who felt that way felt back then. So NFTs are really where I found a lot of the excitement, potential long-term opportunity. I get really excited about DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, because I think coming from like the nonprofit world and what like community organization looks like, what does community governments and community decision making looks like, I think there's huge potential for it in terms of like redistributing a power structure that has disproportionately marginalized underrepresented people and disproportionately benefited the 1%. So I think there's like a lot of excitement there. I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of doing this because it's complicated. It's very complex. Blockchain and being able to track and understand transparency and all those benefits that could be applicable to DAOs and community organizing and charity and philanthropy, all those things, it just hasn't been figured out yet. And I don't have the energy to try to figure it out right now. So I'm sticking to NFTs.
It's a process, man. And folks who got into this maybe 10 years ago have that time that they can use to just absorb the information, recalibrate, and then ultimately just have a pulse on where things are going. It's always feels like information is coming through a fire hose at times with respect to new technology, especially blockchain.
Yeah, and the fire hose is in your mouth.
Yeah.
And you can't breathe and you can't catch up. It's unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah, so I like your approach, sometimes focusing on one side of it and really getting comfortable with that can really just give you good footing to then sort of think about how to understand other components of it. So definitely.
Yeah, and then like I said, you're participating in these spaces and you're hearing other people and other people's experiences. And there's some things that they'll say that will just ignite you to want to learn more about an area that you haven't explored yet. And there's other things that you'll hear about and be like, yeah, that doesn't interest me. We're fortunate and privileged to be in this position where we can be where we are in our lives in this very exciting period of time. And so the way that I'm looking at it is like, I don't need to know it all. I'm privileged to be here in this moment to benefit from it whatsoever. And the rest of it will come. You still learn about those things, but I'm trying to do the things that I enjoy most. I'm trying to do the things that like ignite that magic and that excitement of me as a kid. I'm not trying to learn, protocol and how to be a Solidity dev. That's not my jam.
Yeah, I agree. Same boat. I think that what's most interesting to me is how the technology gets adopted with folks who are not really well versed in the technology side of it. So I think that's kind of where a lot of promise lives and opportunity. Yeah. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm not trying to be a Solidity dev, but I do want to understand some of the problems that they're solving with what they do.
Yeah, because that information is power, right? And access to information is privilege. Yeah. And so if we can do those things, we don't know the doors that will open up in the future. We don't know what things are going to happen. But if we're learning anything right now about any of this, it's so easy to come in and see all these people that are, have already won and they've had huge financial gains, or they've, started their own companies, and you come in and it's like, I missed out. Like I wasn't there, even though that's the difference between like them getting in January and me getting in May, right? It's easy to think and feel that, but you have to put in the context, or I put it in the context for myself, of the larger global population, right? Like OpenSea or MetaMask, I don't remember exactly which one, has like under 500,000 wallets. People have multiple wallets, which means under 5,000 people have access to this information, or actually engaging with this information, this technology. That, in comparison to the 7.9 billion people in the entire world, is a small fraction of people that have access to this information and will be able to use it for whatever we want to use it for. So keep that in perspective of like, if you know anything and you are just here, you know more than like 99.9% of the entire world. And that's a really big advantage.
Definitely, definitely. So what NFTs are you looking at or what NFTs did you get involved with that you think are super cool?
I mean, there's a lot. I had a sort of a journey, right? Like I started with VeeFriends, and I was fortunate to start with VeeFriends because I was in a position financially to make that investment and, you know, talk to my wife and say like, this is what we're going to do. And we decided on an investment we were willing to do and be comfortable with doing if it went to zero, right? Like I'm not suggesting that anyone invest anything that they are not comfortable and can live their day-to-day life if that number and the value of what you purchase goes to zero, right? It's volatile, it's going to be having ups and downs. So I started with VeeFriends, and I really like the concept of it. Essentially, it's like the utility token. You're buying something. Some people will argue that you're not necessarily buying it for the art. Some people don't like the art. I think it's cute. But, you know, Gary's not this like acclaimed artist. He's not like a Gabe Weiss or, you know, other amazing artists in the space. So, but it's your access token to his conference, which is the first ever conference he's done. You know, it's going to be big if you follow him. And so really it's a pre-purchase of something else. So that's like the utility that it offers. So that got me to understand kind of more widely what this all looks like. And then I just happened to be very lucky to be in a position where some of the more like blue chip, although I'm cautious about using that, projects were coming up at the time when I was new and that I was kind of excited about investing in that kind of thing. So I started looking at just like PFP projects and what they were doing. And then I had this journey of just like really learning about coming from the entrepreneur and sort of venture capital world. I started looking at it as like, what's my investment thesis? If I'm going to be investing money, what do I need to see in the project itself? And that involves the team, like who's behind it? Are they anonymous or are they doxed? What are they doing that's different? What is the actual like product itself? So not only the drawings or the actual characters that they've created or the art, but like what's the utility behind it? What is like their roadmap is simply a vision slide on a pitch deck, right? So
Yeah.
they're promising all these things just as an entrepreneur promises all these things, but they're not necessarily saying they're going to be able to do them. They have a belief that they can do them. So ultimately for me, it comes down to, if I give this project my money, do I believe that the people in charge have a good shot at doing what they say they're going to do with this money? No different than startups, right? So I started doing that. And then I realized that in the PFP world, it was just very common that the folks that were getting the most attention and the folks that I was paying attention to initially were teams of white cis straight men. And it was just the reality. So I kind of took a step back and just said, like, I care deeply about diversity and inclusion. And while I hadn't thought about it before, I realized that like my collection in my wallet wasn't representative of that value, the value of wanting to support underrepresented artists. And I'm very clear about, like, I look at inclusion very broadly. So I look at it from my own perspective as a lesbian woman that is neurodiverse with ADHD. And then I use my lived experience and my privilege as a white cis woman to open the doors for other communities that don't necessarily have my privilege. So I talk about it in totality. Black folks, brown folks, Asian, indigenous, neurodiverse, folks with disabilities, young people, older people. Like, if you are underrepresented in this space, then I want to know about all the things going on in those communities, even though I can't empathize with that lived experience. So I really just started looking at, you know, how can my collection be representative of my values, and started looking into artists that would be aligned with that, and started collecting from basically marginalized communities and folks that fit that, I guess, identity of underrepresented in this space.
That's dope. That's dope, man. And it's so, you know, refreshing to hear how you capture your observations about what's going on in the space as well. You know, I think, you know, as with, you know, actually, I was reading a report from Gemini the other day stating that 70% of their wallets, self-reported, small sample size, right? But 70% of their wallets are owned by people who are self-identified as white male. So it's something to think about. And, it's
Well,
also,
another good stat is like in the last, I think it was in the last like 22 months, Nifty Gateway did a study and only 5% of all NFT sales went to women. And like a very small percentage of women had the large majority of those sales. So that in and of itself is like, there's a huge disparity there. And that's just between, if we're looking at things in terms of sex as a binary.
right. Wow. Wow. That's a great stat. Wow.
I'll send it to you.
Yeah, well, no, thank you so much for showing up on the podcast. This was great. Chatting with you was amazing. I hope it's not the last time. You have, your message comes across loud and clear. And I think what you're going to do for folks who watch this is, one, you're going to let them know that if you're starting today, it's not too late. You started in May, but also two, it's important to recognize how to think about the opportunity and recognize or set reasonable expectations for what it's going to take for you, in terms of getting to your goals, whatever they might be.
Yeah, just be intentional, right? It's easy. And again, speak to my own experience. I had to be intentional because as someone that gets very excited about many things all at once, if I'm not intentional, I accomplish nothing. And the last thing I wanted as an entrepreneur was to come to this space and get overwhelmed by opportunity, which is very easy to do here, and not get anything done. So that's not to say my intentions now will be my intentions tomorrow. It's just to say, to start off, where am I going to start? And where am I going to put my focus, and where am I going to put my effort and energy? Because as humans, we have limited capacity. And so start there and then be open to where it takes you.
Facts. Appreciate that. Well, all right. Thank you so much. I'm going to give you.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Air hug. Air hug. Air hug.
Air hug. For sure. All right. Well, thanks a lot. And
Cool. Have a good one.